Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Darren Aronofsky film, The Whale. This is a film that had a very small release in December of 2022. It's a film I actually just got around to seeing recently. I didn't get to see it around the time it was released in theaters originally. The area I live in kind of got it kind of late as well, so that didn't really help my situation either. But in this movie, you guys, basically in The Whale, Brendan Fraser plays this writing instructor for this college course that students can take online. But that's kind of in the backdrop. That's just kind of what he does as a career. But what The Whale is essentially about is Brendan Fraser's character has this family that he left behind for this other lover that he fell in love with. It was this, writing student that he met years ago, and he has since favored this other person instead of his family. He left his family for this other person. They, bought a place together and stuff. And so basically, his daughter, his, ex-wife, all the people that he left behind, his family, haven't seen him for years. Over a series of events, over a series of years, Brendan Fraser's instructor loses this other lover that he once fell in love with. And so now he's left all alone at this apartment that the two of them bought together, years ago, as renters and stuff. And over time, he's got morbidly obese. He has a really bad eating disorder. He just can't seem to stop eating. He has a hard time getting off the couch. He has to use this walker to get around places in his apartment. And so basically, with not having a lot of time left, with him not having health insurance, with him refusing to go to a hospital, um, he realizes at this point that he doesn't have a lot of time left. And so basically, over the course of this movie, we follow what's basically, the last couple of days of his life, pretty much. And so he's trying to reconnect with his estranged daughter. He's trying to father her the best way he can. She's clearly not going down the right path in life. She's almost being suspended in school. She's having issues with her classes. She's not getting good grades. The ex-wife doesn't like him. She has a bad drinking problem. So there's a lot of things working against Brendan Fraser's character to kind of, fix the pieces in his life that aren't going so well, and to, reconnect with his family that he hasn't spoken to in years because of, this really bad thing he did to them. And so over the course of this movie, he's trying to figure out, how can I fix my life? How can I fix my life with the very little time that I have left? And, with him not having health insurance, he's worried about being buried in debt forever. And so he, with if he goes, he goes, and unfortunately, there's probably not much the hospital could do for him at this point. And so basically, over the course of this whale, this man tries to correct the wrongs of his life. But overall, guys, The Whale is a good movie. I don't know if I can say I enjoyed it necessarily, but it's a good movie. It's well made. It's a good character study piece. There's certainly things about it that I think are well made. There's also things about it that I think could use improvements. Darren Aronofsky has made some films in the past that I've enjoyed and have liked and have admired, even if they're not necessarily the most pleasant stories to get through. Black Swan is probably my favorite of his. I think that's one of the few films of his that I can watch without feeling completely grossed out, and I can feel invested in it, and get behind why it's as dark as it is and stuff like that. But going back to The Whale, let's go over some positives and negatives of how I felt about this movie. So first and foremost, this is a really good character study piece. It does say a lot about people who struggle with obesity and people that struggle with eating disorders. The film does make really valid points that sometimes eating food that they really like or eating desserts that they really like is sometimes the one and only way that they can feel good about themselves and all that. And how sometimes when obesity gets really bad, it almost feels like it's unfixable, that there's no form of exercise or diet that could bring you back to the way that you were. That's kind of the belief around that. And so the film shows, just how dark and just how scary and depressing that situation can be. So definitely a character study piece. Like I said, it's not necessarily a film to enjoy necessarily, but it's well made in the sense that it's the character study piece that knows what it's trying to be. Brendan Fraser gives a really stellar performance here. That's probably the thing you're going to hear the most about this movie is Brendan Fraser really is very good in this movie. There's a part of me that does hope he does win the Oscar for Best Actor, even if this film doesn't really win anything else necessarily. I think his performance in this was extremely good. So, with the prosthetics and possibly some weight that he had to gain himself just to play this role, and to find a way to get comfortable in the role the best he could while they were filming this. He really does give a stellar performance in this, and I mean, everybody across the board that's seen this movie is saying that he is really good here. So Brendan Fraser's performance, it's absolutely stellar. I think it's awards worthy. Whether he'll win the Oscar or not, we'll have to find out. But his performance in this was very, very good. The film was also mostly set in one setting, and I think that's a very strong way to tell this story. It gives a lot of perspective for Brendan Fraser's character. There's an exception of like one or two other settings that are, or maybe three. There's an exception of maybe like three other settings that are shown throughout the movie. They're not very far away from this place that he lives, but for the most part, it's told in one setting. It's told in this man's apartment. And like I said, it gives a lot of perspective as far as what his limitations are, what kind of struggles he has, who has a way of getting in and out of his place really easily, who doesn't. When he has a knock on the door and the door's locked, how much of a struggle does he have to get to the door to let them in and stuff like that. So I think having the story mostly told in one setting really adds a lot to the story. And it gives a lot of perspective. I think this story was also originally based on a play. And you can kind of tell because I'm sure it was staged like a play originally. And so I think having the one setting choice really adds a lot to the story here. The film also has a lot to say about people who do honest writing, not just writing just to, feel good and to get something out there, but, writing where they're really honestly expressing how they feel about something. And so there's a lot of points in the story where it's either Brendan Fraser himself doing this, or him training his daughter to, be a better writer, or him training his students on his online course to, really express how you feel about something. Don't just hold things back all the time. It's important that you let the world know how you feel about something. And so I think whenever the film explores that idea and, shows you the reward of having honest writing, I think the film depicts very well the reward behind that. The film also has a lot of views on faith. So this is probably the part of the film where it's going to divide a lot of people. So if you're really religious, if you're not very religious, if you believe in certain things but not others, The Whale kind of explores all those things. It has a character that's very religious. It has a character that's not very religious. And you'll have people like Brendan Fraser and so on and so forth that believe in some of it but not all of it. So the film has tons of different viewpoints on faith. And so it's one of those movies where you just kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt because not everybody's right and not everybody's wrong in how they express this kind of thing. So go into this film knowing that there is several different points of view on faith in this movie. I think all are very valid. Each character kind of expresses how they feel certain ways I think are valid enough for how they feel about it. I thought it was interesting. So the film does have a lot of viewpoints on faith. It's not just one-sided on that. For negatives of The Whale, though, there's unfortunately a lot of really unlikable characters in this movie. I would say, with the exception of Brendan Fraser and maybe the exception of his nurse, almost every character in this film is unlikable. There's something about them. There's something about their past that's not likable. There's something about their actions that's not likable. I would say, in particular, the Brendan Fraser daughter, who's played by, I think, Sadie Sink from Stranger Things, I believe. There's a lot of things about her character that is just not likable at all. And it's just one of those films where it's hard to root for somebody. You really want this Brendan Fraser guy, to fix his life and get back on the right track and everything. But you get to characters like Sadie Sink and this religious kid that keeps showing up at his doorstep and this pizza guy and all this other stuff. And there's just a lot of unlikable traits on a lot of these characters. There's some certain things that they do and say that just are not very admirable for characters. So unfortunately, it's just not one of those films where it has a lot of characters to root for. So go into this film knowing that Brendan Fraser is probably the only character that you're going to really root for in this film because there's an actual end goal with him that you want him to achieve throughout the movie. And overall, I think more flashback scenes felt necessary for this movie. I understand this was originally told as a play, but when you're adapting a play into a movie, I think there's a lot of liberties and a lot of changes that have to be made to properly tell the story on film. There's just a lot of details missing from the story, specifically about this other lover that Brendan Fraser left his family for. And there's occasionally a use of flashbacks here, but the film really needed more of them. There really could have been scenes where maybe we see Brendan Fraser's body before it became the way it did. Maybe we see him and this other lover go out and do something. Um, there's just a lot of details I feel like the film is missing because it doesn't have enough uses of flashbacks, which I think could really help the movie. Because really, right away into this movie, we meet where this Brendan Fraser character is at, and then we really kind of get caught up with how he got that way through conversations in the movie. And I just don't think that's the best cinematic way to express your story in a movie. And so for me personally, I thought more flashbacks could have been used. It really would have helped this film a lot, specifically with certain details. And I also never really got liked that we never really get to meet this other lover that Brendan Fraser, left his family for, that kind of caused all of this. For me personally, it's such a pivotal character to as to why everything's happening the way that it is. It felt kind of wrong to me that we never got to meet this person. We never got to meet why exactly Brendan Fraser saw in this person that made him could have do all this. But for me personally, the fact that we only get to know this character through conversation, through what characters bring up throughout the movie, felt very lazy to me as far as getting to know this character that the film really wants us to feel invested in. Another negative I have of this movie is the opening scene is extremely pointless. I just don't understand why this, and I can basically tell you what it is, just because it's right when the movie begins. It's really not ruining anything for you. But basically, a character gets put at a bus stop, leaves the bus stop, and that's the end of the opening scene. It really has no place in the story. It really is. I don't know if that's supposed to be Brendan Fraser's character before all this went down, or I don't know what that opening was about. So I don't get why Darren Aronofsky put that in there. I think he could have just started with the scene that we get to meet Brendan Fraser on right away. But like I said, I think more flashbacks could have helped this film with some things that we don't really get to see very much of before all of this went down. But overall, I'm going to give The Whale an 8 out of 10. There's certain character study elements. There's, a really good performance from Brendan Fraser here. The one setting choice I think is very strong. The film has a lot to say about honest writing. There's a lot of viewpoints on faith, but there's a lot of things about it that just aren't that great. Like many unlikable characters, more flashback scenes felt necessary. We didn't get to meet this other lover that the film talks about a lot, and the opening scene of this film I thought was extremely pointless. But overall, 8 out of 10. It's good enough for me to recommend it. I don't think you have to go out of your way to see this one, but maybe before the Oscars happen, you can see if you feel yourself that Brendan Fraser's performance feels like it's award worthy. 8 out of 10 for me. I enjoyed The Whale. I think it's a good character study piece, but I think there's also a lot of problems with it, and I probably won't rewatch it. So it's a good enough movie for me to recommend it, but go into this film knowing that it's not perfect either. So 8 out of 10 for me.